All right, guys, welcome back to this third lesson in this series on how to use Bottle. In the last lesson, we looked at how to just render out some index pages, and we looked at a basic if statement in the template. We're going to use some similar stuff here to render out actual posts here in a second. First things first, though, I want to go ahead and look at what our server looks like. So here we go. I'm going to reload. This is the actual server live. And it just says this is my site. So we know if we go to /blog, it'll take us to the blog. But let's make it a little bit easier for ourselves in the future. We're not going to add an index page or anything, but I will say, just add an anchor link like we did to get to the post form link. So we're just going to say this is my site. Check out my blog, and blog is going to be wrapped inside of an href or inside an anchor tag with an href that sends it to blog as a URL. So check out my blog, and I'll put a period on there. There we go. So now if we reload, there we go. We click that, sends us to here. So it says here, there's no post. How about adding one? Well, that makes sense because our application, there's no post here. So it wants us to add one. Well, if we click on that link, we know it doesn't do anything yet. And we're going to do that next lesson, add a form to add new posts. But first, before we can add new posts and see them, we need to be able to render out posts that we already have. So let's simulate having posts in the first place. Let's say post 1 and post 2, just to have some posts here. So we know that we're grabbing these posts. We're sending them in as a keyword argument here as the variable posts. And if we go to the blog, we're saying if posts. So we're saying if posts, which is odd because we do have a post variable. But what's happening is an empty array in Python is actually a falsy value. And I don't know if I explained this last lesson, but basically a falsy value is a value that basically returns false, right? So a none type would be a falsy value. An empty array is a falsy value. Obviously, false is a falsy value. Whereas an array with actual elements in it would be a truthy value. It would return basically true. So we're saying if posts. So is there anything in posts? If there isn't, then we go ahead and skip down here and say there's no post. How about adding one? But if there is something in posts, then it returns a truthy value. So we go ahead and drop into this block of code right here. And it says going to render post. But we don't want to do that quite yet. Or we don't want to do that. Instead, what we want to do is we want to actually render these posts. So let's go ahead and do that. It's pretty simple. It's the same syntax we use, this little % here to denote that we're going to start a Python block. And I'm going to say for post in posts. So this should look familiar, right? This is just a basic for loop in Python. And this post is now our variable we can use inside of that for loop block. So we can just say, let's just put out some text right here. So this will be a post. Now the last thing you need to do with a for loop is you need to end it. Just like any other block of Python in your template, you need to end it. So we're going to go ahead and end it there. And we're going to check out what this looks like. Reload for the server's sake, and here we go. This will be a post, and again, this will be a post. And we see that twice because there's two posts in here, so it loops twice and says this will be a post. But that's not very pretty. It doesn't really show us the post, so let's go ahead and do that. Hopefully you remember this because I think we've seen this syntax before, but if not, this syntax right here says I'm not doing a block or a loop or an if statement. I'm just outputting a variable, just a little bit of data to the web page. So this just is going to render this variable here, right here in this area. So let's go ahead and reload here, and we see post 1, post 2, which were the posts that we preloaded into our array here in the app. So there we go. But that doesn't look very pretty. We don't want all our posts to be lined up in a row like that. So let's go ahead and wrap that in an li element. So I'm going to grab this here and paste it in. So there we go. Now if we come here, okay, so these are both li's, but if you have a sharp eye here, you'll notice that it's not indented, and typically lists should be indented. The reason it's not indented is because we just have li's by themselves. In fact, if we hover over here, it's saying element li is not allowed here. The reason for that being is that you're supposed to wrap any list in either a UL for unordered list or an OL for ordered list. So here we go. Let's go ahead and check that out now. And there we go. We got both of them indented. Now I want to show you something I see a lot. I see people doing this a lot. I'm going to take this closing unordered list tag and I'm going to put it before the end of the for loop. And notice what happens when I do that. What happens is this unordered list is ended on the first iteration of the for loop because it loops through, and this is technically inside the for loop. Even though it's not indented correctly, don't pay attention to that. It's in the first iteration of the for loop because it's before the end. Everything before the end is considered inside the for loop. So we want to go ahead and take that out. Make sure it's after the end. Make sure we end the list after we end the for loop. So the only thing being repeated is the list item itself, and everything is lined up and indented correctly. So there we go. There's how we go ahead and order those, or there's how we go ahead and render those posts out. In the next lesson, we're going to go ahead and see how to actually add new posts dynamically to our list. Now, one last thing I want to talk about here, while we're talking about all these Python blocks you can do in code, another thing I see a lot, and it's very bad because you'll run into problems in the future if you try to start doing stuff like this. I'll see people do stuff like this, right? They'll just start a Python block and start doing all sorts of Python in here. They'll say, you know, my var equals 9, and then 9 plus whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know, just whatever logic you want to think of. They'll do Python logic, even database manipulation inside their template. That's bad, and you should really avoid that. What a template's meant for is just simple Python blocks, right? So a simple if statement here, a simple for loop or while loop here. What it's meant to do is just list out and render out data that's already been manipulated before it got sent to the template. So you should do all your data manipulation over here. For us, it's the post list, but you should do it in whatever function that makes sense in your application. You should not do it in your template. So if we wanted to do some manipulation of this post array every time, we could say post.append just visited, right? So every time we visit this URL, it's going to append visited, 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 visited. But you'll notice I didn't make any Python changes here. I'm just listing out what gets sent to me. So I manipulate the data in the application, and then I send that already formulated data to the template. I grab it in the template and I render it out. I don't do manipulation in my template. So try to stick to that concept there. That's a really good practice to start getting into so you don't have errors happening and you don't know why. Plus, let's admit, this syntax, not as pretty as this syntax. You gotta start doing all sorts of special stuff. It just gets ugly. So do all your logic in your application, all your rendering in your template. I hope that makes sense, and I hope to see you guys next lesson.